Aloha my friends, and welcome to my channel Tales from the Road. My name is Pierce, and today we're going to be talking about the lesser traveled South American nation of Paraguay. This is a really unique country with a lot going on. So today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know before you go, so you can have a memorable time in a country most people don't get to visit. Come along. To start this video off, let's do a Paraguayan country overview. Geographically speaking, Paraguay is in the central part of South America. It has Argentina on its southern border, Brazil on its northeast, and Bolivia on its northwest. Paraguay sits in something called the Gran Chaco, which is this very sparsely populated central plains region, which is a lowland, semi-arid. Not a lot of people live there, and not a lot of animals live there. It's very wild in many senses. And this connects with the history as well. The best way to access Paraguay is by river, which means not a lot of people moved in there and not a lot of native and indigenous tribes were really occupying this land. Paraguay is also completely landlocked, although it has one of the biggest navies in South America. Strange, right? Looking at the history now, we can point out to some very important historical times for Paraguay. There were, of course, first the pre-Columbian indigenous times, in which various indigenous peoples occupied this Gran Chaco region. The most important for our modern Paraguayan state are the Guarani, who are the largest indigenous ethnic group that you'll find in the country today. In the mid-1500s, the Spanish Empire came and took over most of South America, as we know, and Paraguay was included within this. Paraguay, however, was not really written into the most important places in South America, as it was very hard to get to, very rugged, and there wasn't a lot of human capital, like people to use to build things, as well as natural resources like Bolivia and Chile and Argentina and other places. This meant that Paraguay was really populated by Christian missionaries and the people who really wanted to settle, to farm, to be gauchos or like cowboys. So it was really like a rugged place to kind of move to, and that landscape kind of turned Paraguay into what it is today. After, the 250 years of Spanish colonial rule, Paraguayan independence, just like many other independence movements in the region, popped up, and Paraguay became its own state. Paraguay actually used to be one of the largest countries in the South American region after independence, but due to political strife and wars with other surrounding countries, including the Triple Alliance of Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, Paraguay lost nearly half of its population and a big chunk of their land. This left the country without a lot of manpower for the future and without access to the sea, which made Paraguay one of the poorest places in South America and kind of set the stage how the country would be moving forward politically and economically towards the future. Regarding the more modern times, I think the most important thing that you would need to know is that Paraguay had a long-standing kind of dictatorship, that spanned the 70s and the 80s and was not a great time to be in Paraguay for sure. And of course, out of that, just like many other South American countries, they were able to implement a democracy and create the state in which we can visit and enjoy today. I'm not gonna lie, Paraguay today is an interesting place. While it is very Spanish, everyone speaks Spanish, they have Spanish colonial buildings, it has a very Spanish South American feel, there is something else going on here. And the fact is that, historically speaking, the majority of the population are what we call today as mestizo. Mestizo are people who come from half European background and half native indigenous background. That being said, Paraguay actually is one of the least Spanish-speaking countries in South America, as over 80% of the population speaks Guarani, which is, as I said earlier, the largest indigenous group in Paraguay. This means that the country is really connected to its indigenous history, and most people in Paraguay aren't speaking Spanish on a daily basis, but they're speaking something called Yopara, which is a kind of like a mixed language between Spanish and Guarani that most people understand, that other foreigners certainly can't. With such a varied history and with so many hands kind of going into the pot in this very mixed country, it's a perfect place to explore because it's authentic and uniquely itself. And you can be one of the first tourists to kind of like get in there at the ground level and discover a place that most people just don't have the opportunity to visit. So now that you know a little bit about Paraguay's past, what they're about, what their history was, and who they are, let's talk about the things you need to know, the practical information to make sure that you have an awesome trip in this very unknown country. Before we get to more information on this exotic destination, I do want to let you guys know that I am on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, it would really help me out. But if not, I will of course settle for a like and a subscribe. Alright, let's talk about Paraguay. First off, let's get into the top 5 things you need to do on your time in Paraguay. Number 1, and probably the most obvious thing you'll do in Paraguay, is visit its capital city, Asunción. Asunción is a vibrant city of about 1 million people, and it has a lot going for it. It has a beautiful old town, it has really nice authentic restaurants, it has a really interesting vibe and sits on a beautiful river called the Paraty. This is a place where you can really get in touch with the culture, really understand what's going on in Paraguay, and kind of go explore its past and history through its museums, through its restaurants, and through its people. Number 2, and maybe the majority of the reason people go to Paraguay in the first place, is to go to the beautiful Iguazu Falls. Iguazu Falls are one of the largest waterfalls in the entire planet. It actually sits on the triple border between Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. You can actually go to all 3 countries in the same day if you really wanted to, and it's just fantastic. Number 3 is you can rent a car or take a bus and go into the Chaco, the place that I was explaining earlier, this lowland, and really explore the sort of rural culture that is Paraguay. I'm not gonna lie, there isn't a lot to do in the Chaco, but there are a few cool day trips that you can do, a few cool old Spanish cities, and most notably, really nice national parks that you can visit. Number 4 is you can take about a 4-hour car ride or bus ride from Asunción and visit the Mission of the Holy Trinity, which is this old Jesuit missionary site near the city of Encarnacion in the southeastern part of the country. These are really beautiful ruins that speak to the sort of missionary vibe of the early Spanish settler times. It really explains the history of Paraguay and the crazy people that went there initially. Number 5 would be to try some local Paraguayan food in a local Paraguayan restaurant or cafe. I'm going to talk about this more in the food section, but Paraguayan food really is the living narrative of a culture of immigrants that really define modern Paraguay today. You'll see influences from German food, from Spanish food, from Italian food, from Guarani food, all in the same table, and that makes for something really interesting. So let's talk about Paraguayan money. The Paraguayans use the currency called the Guarani, which is of course named after the Guarani indigenous people. And right now it stands that 7,300 Guaranis is equal to about $1 US. So realistically, Paraguay is a very affordable country for foreigners. I can give you some examples. I was staying in a 1-bedroom apartment for about 15 days, and it would have come out to around $500 a month in the best and most safe part of the city. If you're looking at eating out or doing something simple like that, you can have lunch for maybe $3, $4. You can go out for drinks for about the same price. In general, it's a very cheap country by Western standards. That means the bang for your buck in this country is pretty good. Visas. If you're an American traveling to Paraguay, you get 30 days, but be aware that it is different because most South American countries you do get 90 days. You can of course easily go over the land borders from any of the various countries that border it. Many people go to Paraguay via the Iguazu Falls in the east. You can also arrive to Paraguay via the Asunción airport, which is a very easy process because it's a very small city with a very small airport, and the customs, for example, getting into the country, stamping your passport, everything was very, very fast. Be aware that people in Paraguay don't often speak English, and so if you're arriving via the airport, be prepared to answer questions about why you're there, and also have a returning flight out of Paraguay because they did ask me how long I was staying, where I was staying, and when I was leaving. Transportation. I found the transportation in Asunción to be pretty simple. They have Uber, which is huge, and the Uber was very fair price and it was really easy to use. The city of Asunción is not the most walkable city, as you probably wouldn't be staying in the city center because the city center at night is kind of dangerous, so you'd probably be staying in one of the nicer suburbs, like the one that I stayed in, which is, I believe, is called Villa Mora. Very, very nice area. The city is pretty small, pretty walkable, but you definitely would need to use a taxi if you wanted to go to the city center from any of the places that tourists normally stay. Paraguay also has intercity buses that run quite often, pretty easy to use. The only issue I found is that you couldn't book online. You had to book in person, and sometimes that was a little bit complicated, especially if you didn't speak Spanish. So one of the major questions about South America that people like to know about is, of course, safety. Is Paraguay a safe country? I think the short-term answer would be yes. Paraguay was one of the only countries in South America where I felt really comfortable walking around outside at night. It seemed really low-key, really chill, really easygoing, and most of the people were really at home, so the streets were even just generally pretty quiet. The city center of Asunción, just like the city center of many South American cities, can be dangerous at night, and specifically in Asunción, they have basically a lot of people who are displaced from various economic and let's call it natural disaster crises that are living in kind of a shanty town, legitimately in the center, right in front of the big church in Asunción. So that area is very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend going there at all, but there are a lot of police around there, so that can keep you safe in any case. The whole point is just make sure you're not somewhere where you shouldn't be at the wrong time in the wrong place. So if you can avoid being somewhere at night in a place where you don't know in the city center, I think in Paraguay you'd really have no issues at all. How about internet? How is the internet in Paraguay? In Asunción, I found the internet at my apartment personally was fine. I'm sure it could vary if you get to a more rural region, and it seems like the internet connection via the telephone companies probably hit or miss depending on if you're in a major area or not. So to end the video, I want to talk about my favorite section, which is of course food, or in Paraguay you can say comida. So in Paraguay, the most famous foods that people really wanted me to try were these two sort of corn cake things one called sopa paraguayana and the other one being called chipa guasu. Both of these come in large pans, and normally you're gonna get a slice, which is like a kind of a square. I believe chipa guasu has some cheese on the inside, and the sopa paraguayana does not. Sopa, of course, means soup in Spanish, but it's not that at all. It's really a corn cake. Both of them are nicely spiced and are something that really kind of fulfill your Paraguayan food adventures, or it's a good place to start. The other dish that people really wanted me to try during my time there, and was probably my favorite mouthful of food in Paraguay, was something called a mbeju. I'm not sure you say the M or not, but this is like a starch cake. I believe it comes from potato starch or manioca flour starch, and it's, you know, this big, like the size of your head, should come out warm, really crispy, with a nice sort of cheese kind of vibe to it. Something memorable, and I've never had anything else like it. So you have to go to Paraguay and try the mbeju. An important part of the culture in Paraguay specifically is, of course, drinking mate. Mate being this kind of tea-like substance that people from all over South America drink, whether you're in Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, it's even in parts of Brazil, it's very famous. But specifically in Paraguay, you find something called tereré, I believe I pronounced that right, and it's actually this apparatus for drinking the mate, and it's often served cold. It's kind of, think kind of like a refreshing green tea, cold sort of thing, iced green tea. Honestly, really good, really traditional, and something you have to do in Asunción for sure. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. A like and a subscribe would of course be super helpful, so make sure to like and subscribe this video if you want to stay tuned to more of this content. We're going to do more food videos, we're going to do more of these informational travel videos, and I hope you guys come along for the ride. Thank you so much for watching. Muchas gracias, and we'll see you in the next one.